Hello, lovers of literature. Hope you're doing okay in this quarantine days. As you all know, we come up with something that, of course, enhances our sensitivity for creative art and, of course, literature. So today, just quite unlike to what we do, I have thought of why not read a story? A story that is written by one of the most acclaimed writer and my personal favorite is Ernest Hemmingway. And the story that we are going to read is The Old Man at the Bridge. To tell you about Mr. Hemmingway, what makes me what makes me love about him is his succinct and lucid prose style, which exerted a powerful influence on American and British fiction in the 20th century. And of course, he was a Nobel Prize. He won the Nobel Prize of Literature in 1954. And another thing to be noted is his intensity in making a simple subject matter so worthwhile to the readers. And of course, his presentation of masculinity in his writings is also evident in most of his prose. So as I told you, we are going to read the story, The Old Man at the Bridge. And this is what a quite short biographical sketch of Mr. Hemmingway. And if we talk about what he was what he pursued as his profession, so of course he always wanted to take part in the World War I. He always wanted to take part in wars. But what happened was he was always rejected for having a defective eye. But later on, he worked as an ambulance driver in the World War I for the American Red Cross. And decorated for heroism and hospitalized in Milan, he also fell in love with a Red Cross nurse, that is Agnes von Kurowski. But he was rejected by the nurse, and that was the most down phase for Mr. Hemmingway, the years that he could not forget from his life. So having said that, let us get into the story that we are going to read. The Old Man at the Bridge was inspired by Hemingway's travels as a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. In fact, the story was originally composed as a news dispatch from the Amposta Bridge over the Ebro River on Easter Sunday in 1938, as the fascists were set to overrun the region. Hemingway was writing for the North American Newspaper Association, but decided to submit this snippet of writing as a short story to a magazine instead of a journalistic article, which accounts to a certain extent for its short length. The story runs over just for 2 pages. So this is the reason why the story is so short. For all of its unorthodox origins, the story deals with familiar Hemingway themes of alienation, of course very important, resignation, not trying to act, being so passive, and impending death. How the old man, the protagonist of the story, falls prey to the situation, to the war. The old man is the heroic fatalist or fatalistic hero of the story, resigned to his fate as the casualty of the war. He's too old, too tired to move, he says, and demonstrates to the narrator, and the narrator reflects that he is sure to be killed once the fascists advance to the bridge across the Ebro. His life is prolonged by the fact that the day is overcast and the fascists cannot launch their planes, and his mind is eased by the fact that the cats, the animals that he took care of, and the cats can look after themselves. But aside from that, the narrator says nothing can be done for him, and his death seems to be certain. As occurs elsewhere in Hemingway's stories or writings, especially in The Killers, the narrator of the story seems more affected by the inevitability of the man's probable fate than by the old man. Just as the old man worries about the goats he left behind, and the narrator tells him it's best not to think about them, the narrator worries about the old man he will have to leave behind, but is obviously not able to stop thinking about the old man. Nevertheless, at the end, one lingering question always intervenes the mind of the reader. What is that? That what has come upon to the old man? And also, why does the narrator help the old man at least part of the way to the trucks bound for Barcelona? Why is it so? Surely everyone, including the narrator and the old man, is going in the same direction to save their lives. But why didn't the narrator took this great task of saving the 76-year-old man who had already walked 12 kilometers along at least part of the way to safety? Are the old man's fatalism and the narrator's despair justified? Are they all thinking in the same way? Since the story began as a news dispatch recounting an encounter Hemingway actually had, this question takes on more than academic significance as to why this has happened. Why the old man was not saved by our narrator. There is one symbol of hope in the story, and that is what is that the beginning of the narrator's conversation with the old man, the birds and the old man was looking after were referred to as pigeons. The birds were mentioned as to be pigeons, but by the end of the story, if you notice, we are of course going to read they become doves. And doves, we know, are a symbol of peace in wartime. The narrator makes the switch deliberately, or is it just an ironic implication? He asked, "Did you leave the dove cage unlocked?" It is unclear whether this is a slip of tongue, because the narrator is clearly distracted by the impending arrival of the enemy. Or if Hemingway is attempting to give the image of the birds flying away an even more positive tint by referring to them as symbols of peace. What is it? So after having said that, let us delve directly into the story. An old man with still rimmed spectacles and very dusty clothes sat by the side of the road. There was a pontoon bridge across the river, and carts, trucks, men, women, and children were crossing it. So everyone of all the age groups were trying to save themselves. The mule-drawn cart staggered up the steep bank from the bridge, with soldiers helping push against the spokes of the wheels. The trucks ground up and away, heading out of it all, and the peasants plodded along in the ankle-deep dust. So aren't everyone toiling to move themselves to a safer place? Now, here comes the protagonist of the story, but the old man who is so different from the others. Why? Because he seems to be alienated from others, because he lacks the energy to live, because he doesn't find meaning to live. But the old man sat there without moving. He was too tired to go any farther. Now comes another character. It was my business to cross the bridge. Whose business? Of course, the business of the narrator, who is a scout, who creates the story of the old man at the bridge. Through his telling of the story, he gradually articulates who the old man is and what he represents. The scout at the beginning is the impersonal narrator who sees the old man and decides to engage him in the conversation. So this is another character that is introduced. So he says, it was my business to cross the bridge, explore the bridgehead beyond, and find out to what point the enemy had advanced. I did this and returned over the bridge. There were not so many carts now, and very few people on foot, but the old man was still there. So this old man felt no urge to save himself. Why? Because he felt that he was too old, that he was too forsaken to live in this wartime. And he found no meaning to live too. Where do you come from? I asked him. From San Carlos, he said, and smiled. That was his native town, and so it gave him pleasure to mention it, and he smiled. So this is maybe for the first and the last time we see the protagonist, the old man, to give a smile. And what makes him smile? To think of his native town. The returning back to his home, or the memory of his home, is the only hope he carries from his home after walking so long. And what he says, I was taking care of animals, he explained. Excuse me. Oh, I said, not quite understanding. So it seems whatever the old man says is beyond the understanding of a man who is trying to save himself during the wartime. He just says I was taking care of animals. When people are caring for their own lives, who seems to think of animals? Yes, he said. And I stayed, you see, taking care of animals. I was the last one to leave the town of San Carlos, which means that he never wanted to leave San Carlos because he really wanted to care for the animals and to care less about himself and whatever was going on. He did not look like a shepherd nor a herdsman, and I looked at his black, dusty clothes and his grey, dusty face. So what kind of image do we get? Something that is so bleak. Everything about him seems to be black, grey, and his steel-rimmed spectacles. So this is the appearance of the old man. And said, what animals were they? Various animals, he said, and shook his head. I had to leave them. I was watching the bridge and African-looking country of the Ebro Delta and wondering how long now it would be before we would see the enemy. So this man is more worried about the real things that was going to happen within some time, and listening all the while for the first noises that would signal that ever mysterious event called contacts. And the old man still sat there. What animals were they? I asked. There were 3 animals altogether, he explains. There were 2 goats and a cat. And then there were 4 pairs of pigeons. Now you have to remember, of course, that these animals, three symbolic animals, of course, have a long history of conveying symbolic meaning. The cat, we know, is said to have 9 lives and, of course, the survivor. Pigeons, which become doves later on, is to be mentioned just the second, because they can fly away from the war. And doves associated with peace, which in the context is ironic. The doves will fly away. But next comes the goats, the animals who can't escape, sacrificial animals, scapegoats, who might be our protagonist, that is the old man, who are innocent victims and cannot but save themselves. In the course of the story, as I told you, the old man is of course symbolized as the goats. And next comes, "And you had to leave them?" I asked. "Yes." "Why you had to leave them?" "Because of the artillery. The captain told me to go because of the artillery." "And you have no family?" I asked, watching the far end of the bridge, where a few last carts were hurrying down the slope of the bank. "No," he said. So he had no family to take care of. He only had those animals. "No," he said, "only the animals," I stated. "The cat, of course, will be all right, because the cat is a survivor. A cat can look out for itself. But I cannot think what will become of the others." Now comes the next question, which is a very, very important question. "What politics have you?" I asked. I am without politics. So he is the man who speaks for people who do not have politics, who is not concerned what happens. But they fall prey to the situation. So this is the story of a common man who is more interested not in saving anyone, not in saving himself, but only his animals. I'm 76 years old. I have come 12 kilometers now, and I think now I can go no farther. "This is not a good place to stop," I said. "If you can make it." There are trucks up the road where it forks for Tortosa. So he just guides him. There are trucks who can take him to another place where he might save himself. "I will wait a while," he said, "and then I will go." Where do the trucks go? So why does he want to stay there? He wants to stay there because he just wants to wander a while. "Towards Barcelona," I told him. "I know no one in that direction," he said. "But thank you very much. Thank you again very much." He looked at me very blankly and tiredly, then said, having to share his worry with someone, "The cat will be all right. I am sure. There is no need to be unquiet about the cat." Unquiet? Of course, disturbed. But the others? Now, what do you think about the others? Why? They will probably come through it all right. You think so? So this man gives him a little more hope, telling him they will come through all right. "Why not?" I said, watching the far bank, where now there were no carts. Why? Because everyone have transported themselves safely. "But what will they do under the artillery when I was told to leave because of the artillery?" So who thinks about the animals? When a human cannot save himself during the stage of such unrest, how would the animals save themselves? "Did you leave the dove cage unlocked?" So do you see, there were pigeons, now comes dove, and specifically dove cage unlocked, which means that doves are just symbols of peace, and during the wartime, This is ironic. It's better not to think about the others, he said. If you are rested, I would go, I urged. Get up and try to walk now. So he just tells him that why not walk some more time? Thank you, he said, and got to his feet, swayed from side to side, and then sat down backwards in the dust. So he again fell down. I was taking care of animals, he said dully, but no longer to me. I was only taking care of himself, as if he was so lost that he was talking only to himself. There was nothing to do about him. It was Easter Sunday. So very symbolic, so very symbolic. It was Easter Sunday. What is this Easter Sunday? Of course, it has a symbolic significance, which I'm going to come sometime later. Let us deal with the story. There was nothing to do about him. It was Easter Sunday, and the fascists were advancing towards the Ebro. It was a grey, overcast day with a low ceiling, so their planes were not up. That and the fact that cats know how to look after themselves was all the good luck that the old man would ever have. Here comes the end of the story. Such a beautiful, such a splendid, tender story that talks more about the common man. So at last, this Easter Sunday, it of course is a symbolic reference. The old man's fate is apparently sealed when he finds he cannot walk any farther. He feels as if there is an end to his going anywhere. He disengages from the narrator and voices his sense of great wrong to a deaf world. The narrator decides that in this weakened and irrational state, the old man is beyond hope. Like the old man said about his animals, the narrator seems to think it's best not to concern himself about the man's fate. The narrator's opponents are mostly Catholic group in the Spanish Civil War. So the fact that they're advancing a violent campaign on Easter Sunday, a day that celebrates Jesus' resurrection from a violent death, is deeply hypocritical. Why? Because the narrator's own lack of mercy on this meaningful day is also ironic, as he refuses to acknowledge the same flaws in himself that he calls attention to in others. The enemy's delayed advance due to poor weather may grant the old man a temporary reprieve from death, and his beloved cat should be able to survive fine. And his beloved cat, of course, gives him a little respite from the trauma that he is going through of not being able to save his animals. Otherwise, his luck has completely run out. The narrator implies that the mere chance controls whether people live or die, again refusing to acknowledge that his actions and actions of others have directly created this fatal situation. Even on Easter, he does not imagine God will intervene on behalf of his shepherd, that is the old man. There is only random luck. So what happens? He falls prey to his own fate, just like the goats. So he has become a scapegoat to his situation. The story ends on a note of complete alienation, because the old man never understood, without having any politics, that what men are fighting for. And of course, it talks about the theme of life, death, war, and also religion and morality. So these are the themes that are talked about in the story. Now, having said that, let us go into an in-depth study of the themes. First theme, that is life, death, and war. In The Old Man at the Bridge, the narrator, a soldier or a scout in the Spanish Civil War, tries to convince an old man sitting on the side of the road to get himself to his toes and to get himself to a better position before the enemies attack. While the narrator clearly worries that the old man will die if he stays there, the old man isn't worried about his own safety. Only thing he cares for is his animals. And having nowhere to go, he just manages to walk few steps and falls back. And what is the only hope? Is that as the sky is grey and overcast, the enemy planes cannot landfall. And of course, the narrator's chance for survival is extended. Sorry, not the narrators. Of course, the narrators as well as the protagonist, that is the old man's. Next comes alienation. The title character of the old man at the bridge has no family, no politics, nowhere to go. The violence of the Spanish Civil War has forced him to come so far away from his native town, San Carlos. He has walked so long, and his clothes and his appearance seems to be malformed, disheveled. He sits by the side of the road while others flee. Only person that he converses to is the narrator, because the narrator is bound to take care of the entire situation. And he is so concerned about the old man's safety, whereas the old man is not. Because he feels alienated, because he feels he has nothing to take care of. The story implies that it's the inevitable fate of the old man to be so forlorn from the others. Next comes the religion and the morality. Old Man at the Bridge, a wartime story set on Easter Sunday, is full of both implicit and explicit references to Christianity. However, none of the story's characters seem to have faith in God or practice Christian morality. In all of the stories, Christian references wind up corrupted. The doves that symbolize peace and hope have an uncertain fate. The old man evokes the good shepherd, but he fails to take care of his flock, just being able to do his duty as anyone would, as a father would. So he has not done his duty as any man with a proper religion and morality would have done. So in a way, it is as if a scornful way of taking religion. In The Old Man at the Bridge, the narrator, a soldier in the Spanish Civil War, tries to convince this old man sitting on the side of the road to get himself to safety before the fighting arrives. While the narrator clearly worries that the old man will die if he stays anymore out there. Old man isn't worried about safety. Instead, he worries aloud about the animals left behind. He talks to himself as if like a mad, frantic person as to what will happen to his animals. From the outset, it talks about the horror of war without even depicting any bloodshed. This is the sign of Hemingway's masterstroke, mind you. So tenderly done. War takes lives ravenously and senselessly, even those that are not directly related to war, which is one of the main themes. A common man without any politics also falls prey to this war. And it leaves people devaluing life, unable to perform even the simplest acts of salvation, that is to take care or to enhance the power of a man who does his duty. From the outset, Hemingway is clear that war, while still somewhat distant, is ominously approaching. In the opening scenes, for instance, many exhausted people are fleeing across the pontoon bridge. The carts, trucks, men, women, children, staggering, plodding along in the ankle-deep dust. All of them heading out of it all, just moving, just carrying themselves. They do not know where but. If there is any doubt as to what they are fleeing, of course, they're fleeing the advancing and approaching enemies, making it clear that the violence of war has not yet arrived, but they're so scared. But it is coming. It's lurking behind. The atmosphere is that of angst, anxiety. But this old man seems to be alienated from the crowd. His repeated urging that the animals won't be saved. But our narrator repeatedly urges him to take care of himself. For the old man, however, the cost of the war is not simply his life. Since by the time of the story begins, the war has already taken what matters most to him, that is the animals. The war has already started in for the old man. When the old man tells the narrator the name of his hometown, it gives him a pleasure to mention it, and he smiled. This is the only time that the story depicts a positive emotion, and it is associated with the memory of his town. The old man has since fled, presumably for good, due to artillery fire. Therefore, even the small moment of happiness is merely an indication of what the man has lost, his home. Furthermore, when he fled his hometown, the old man had to leave behind the animals which he had been carrying: 2 goats, a cat, and 4 pair of pigeons, which later turns out to be doves. It's clear that the duty was important to him because he was the last one to leave once the town was evacuated. The other emotion that Hemingway flags in the story is the old man's anxiety over the animals. He says to himself that there is no need to be unquiet about the cats. But the others? Now, what do you think about the others? Clearly, the man is unquiet, means restless, about all of these animals. The danger that they are in torments him, and he worries about them more than he worries about his own life, which is endangered by his decision to sit on the roadside instead of fleeing away. To him, though, the weight of what he has lost seems to be overweighing than his own life to be saved in the near future. While the narrator does try to get the old man to safety, his efforts, sympathy are much less than the old man's acute concern for the animals. Tragically, it seems that the proximity to war has also made the old man devalue his own life. While the narrator, a soldier whose job is to kill the enemy, has seemingly begun to disregard the lives of others and to think of only his safety. Because he tells there is nothing to do about him. It seems that as if he knows that the old man is doomed to die or to lose his life. Hemingway notes at the end of the story that the day is Easter Sunday, as I've told you, the day of Christ's resurrection, which evokes the possibility of eternal salvation by mankind. By contrast, what happens is, while these 2 men both clearly desire to save lives, whether animal or human, the circumstances of the war make them unable to succeed. Even the simple acts of salvation. caring for animals or making an old man cross a bridge. That means they both failed to do their duty. If Christ gave life for mankind, while these men have begun to devalue life itself, that's the irony of the story. Then Hemingway suggests that the battlefield is a place without humanity or redemption. With that note, let us end the explanation of the story. Because let us ponder on this note that even during the war that goes on, can we really save anyone? And not even ourselves, because we all fall prey to the same situation. A man having politics does it more straightforwardly, and a man without having politics falls prey to the situation without knowing what is he falling prey to. That's the irony of the story. It's a splendid story with such brevity, lucid analysis done by none other than the Nobel laureate Ernest Hemmingway. So with that note, I don't think I have anything more to say. With that beautiful note, let us end today's lecture right here. Stay safe, stay tuned, stay happy, love literature. Thank you so much.